Rachel, do you know Liz Silsky? Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah. I have a raspberry beer club. I wanted for later to go. Up to you for tomorrow. Not for now, obviously. I mean, not now. I'm not trying to. No, because I'm full up now. Right. Up to you. I'll let you know. Yeah, it isn't in fact. I had to say that. They didn't put everything out. So you have it for tomorrow. It's raspberry. Thank you for checking. I just seen it when it was out. It wasn't, so. Let's see. I'll read my tea. It's hot.
Well, no, as long as we're in that, we figure a bigger amount. No, I never worked that way. It's just a little boring. How are you?
I just saw you. The CFI.
Right, you get around. That's a kind of big territory. Round. How you feeling? Hey, bud.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I got tested negative, so. You look No, I was ill on Saturday. I'm glad I got to hang out at the car.
Oh, sorry. Oh, here.
What is it?
Yes,
Listen, I don't know how conscientious you are. You no sooner see me, I think that's about 10 seconds, I'll be on your book. She's a family. Now listen, I got a cousin, I know him, some of money. Sure, I work about it. I did 40 years ago, and I wonder if you can go to work on that. I'm politically, if we work conference. You don't do other people. Okay.
Yeah.
Your father loves by the way,
Oh, good deal. I should bring you a map.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Well, we're not here, I mean, you know.
How about it?
How are you?
Good. Sorry. It's a little crazy now. I'm good. Yeah.
Look at this.
Crazy. Mine, which is
I told my school to bail it. So I was right. Not on 390. So it's for exact we'll talk. Come down.
Michael here? Hi, everybody. Well, while I try to locate anything from my guys' screen for
While we wait for Michael, just a quick couple of announcements. Next month, the reading is on July 26th, which is a Friday, and that's going to feature Suzanne Frischkorn, who's from another part of New York State. She's a terrific poet, award-winning poet. She'll be here to talk about America through a poetic lens, and talk about her new collection called Whipsaw, which won a couple of big awards. Friday, August 23rd, we have a poet named Anthony DiPietro from Rhode Island, who's got a new book called Kiss and Release. He'll be talking about romance and gay identity. And then Friday, September 20th, we've got a talk and reading about post-pandemic prose and poetry by a writer named Corey Zeller from Erie, PA. Corey's a terrific poet. And he's going to come and talk about what it was like to write during and after the pandemic and write stuff he doesn't usually write. And then on Saturday, October 12th, we have Writing the Mennonite Life. Former Mennonite named Jennifer Sears, who's also a novelist, and a friend of mine is coming in. She did not grow up here, but she is a bona fide former Mennonite, and she writes about it. So that's interesting stuff. So that's the next 4 months, 5 months, 4 months. Yeah. All right. And now Michael's here. Michael, hi. Back from Sweden. Fresh off of Sweden. So great. Michael, as almost everyone here probably knows, is a publisher of Foothills Publishing. He's a poet who wrote and performed his first poem. Where, Michael? I was just reading about this again in your book.
In Bath, New York.
In Bath, New York. This is Michael's poetic memoir called Becoming Who I Needed to Be, which is terrific. I highly recommend it if you've not read it. Michael's going to talk about. Bart's gone. Bart's leaving. He doesn't feel so well after all. Michael has a lot to talk about today, including poetry and publishing, but I think a lot more. So, Michael, you want to say anything else, like your annual event? You want to tell people when it is? Because that's something to plan for, I think.
Yeah, September 14th, big reading on Weaver Hill. It's a big annual outdoor reading. John Roach coming all the way out from New Mexico. Rhonda Morton from Corning. Big open mic, shared food and beverages. It's really nice, big gathering September 14th to Saturday. So I'll be getting word out on that. And there's other events too. I'm reading in Geneva on Sunday. And Rachel Bass is there. She came all the way down from Buffalo, and she's reading in Corning on July 9th. There's a lot going on with the,
If anyone else has an event, I know Beth, you've got a
I'm doing
performance
a
coming
show
up.
next Friday at Master. And it's
Okay.
an hour show, and there's all kinds of stuff in it.
Called.
Well, it's called Not All About Me, which implies that a lot of it is about me, but there are a few things about it. You know, and it's interactive, it's an interactive show, it's music and poetry and whatever happens.
probably a little humor too, huh?
Probably. So, yeah, I'm sorry. At 77 West Main in Maxton at 7 o'clock, there's an open mic at 7.
What's the date?
Next Friday, the 28th.
28th.
It's a coffee house that has a whole bunch of chairs, and, you know, it's just a really relaxed kind of thing. It's open mic, and then they can feature it, and I'm a feature this one.
Okay. Anybody else have good news to share? Art, got some news? You must have some news, man. There's always news coming out of Rochester.
Poetry community down here?
Yeah.
Well, we got our new anthology, Just Poets, the right word, emotions, thanks to Foothills. That's an ongoing relationship. How long have we been making our anthology, Carolyn and I?
Well, this is the 20th year, right?
I mean, as long as the group's been around, right?
Yeah.
If anyone's interested, I've got copies. I'm looking to see. Did you get yours? Where? So that's, I guess that's what it is.
Okay, anything going on at the Little or
So the next, oh, so here we go. So just for us, there's 4 of us in here. So the 20th anniversary celebration for the group will be at the theater, September 22nd. That's a Sunday. Okay. So that gives you enough read time, and we want everybody to read, bring a poem, and we'll make a big part.
All right. All right, thank you. And without further ado then, we bring up Michael, whose story I've only told a little bit of. Michael Czarnecki, everyone.
Oh, thank you, George. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for being here on this humid summer day. It dropped a little bit tonight, which I was thankful for. And I always start out my readings by, is this coming through okay if I just sit like this? Just, okay? Yeah. What?
Not hearing you?
It's closer.
Need a little more volume?
Yeah, no, how's that? Is
I
that
think
better?
that's
Yeah.
really good. But, you know, you're talking not that person.
So is this okay?
Yes.
Sounds
Okay. Good. I always like to start my readings out by reading somebody else's poem, to honor the tradition, introduce another poet. And I'm going to read from a book that we published actually called In the Spirit of Dao Chen. And Dao Chen was a poet from 1600 years ago in China. And there's 5 poets in this collection. David Budbill, Antler, Sam Hamill, myself, and Charlie Rossiter, who was the editor. And we've all been influenced by Dao Chen. So I want to read a poem of David Budbill's. How many of you are familiar with David Budbill?
With David.
David Budbill, yeah, Vermont poet. He passed away a few years ago. Poet, playwright, really wonderful, wonderful person. But this is a piece of his called Incident. 40 years ago, and he wrote about Judavine Mountain. I think that's how you pronounce it, Judavine, I believe. Mountain is a fictitious place in Incident. 40 years ago, when I came to Judavine Mountain, I put away my date book. Days and months flowed by like the river. I followed a calendar no smaller than the seasons. Then one gray and wet November day, on a high plateau where open fields stretched away on both sides of the road, while I drove a tractor and a wagon down off Judavine Mountain, something compelled me to stop and wait. After a while, a man climbed out of my chest and down off the tractor. He straightened his tie, picked up his briefcase, looked at me quizzically, nodded, smiled, stepped across the road into a brown field and hurried off toward the woods. I watched until he disappeared. I started the tractor again and drove off into the rest of my life. Let's see. David Budbill, Incident. One other poem, a real short one. Charlie Rossiter, a wonderful friend and poet, lives in Vermont now also, but this is, what kind of job do you have? Blue collar, white collar? I spend most days in a t-shirt. Writing poems is a no-collar job. Little Charlie Rossiter, yes. He'll be coming to Wheeler Hill September 14th. He's planning on making the trip out from Vermont. So I'm going to start with a few summer haiku. A book called Morning Mist. It's a collection of 400 or so haiku. And I do have books on the table there. Any book is $10 today if anyone's interested, okay? So just some summer haiku. In middle of road, yellow caterpillar crawls. I'll help him along. Just after waking from deep inside rain-drenched woods, thrushes flute-like song. On poetic road, so many ragged robins Brighton roadside fields. Ragged robins, you familiar with those, flower? Yeah, I never seen them till this one time, and just the field was full of them, and I looked them up, and ragged robins, you know.
I went up to, the Albany area about a couple weeks ago, Alan Castline and Mark and I were there remarking on the ragged robins. These little spidery pink flowers everywhere.
Yeah, and
On the roadways, you know.
and I saw them on the way to Albany, like somewhere more like
Yeah,
east central New York.
Cool
so-
flower.
But I don't see them around here, yeah.
I have them near Greenwood.
Flick down on pedal, car speeds around cattle truck. Ah, fresh air again. Cool easterly breeze ripples on canal's surface, goosebumps on my arms. Oh, that feels good, just saying that. Midday darkening, thunder rumbles over hills, sudden flash of doubt. Hidden under plants, small patch of amanitas, beautiful poison. Mushrooms, of course. Old hitchhiking route, decades later, now in car, same ancient mountains. Morning mountain hike, sun burns away ocean fog, clear vision, clear mind. After summer rain, in partial circle on lawn, fairy ring mushrooms. Ever see fairy ring mushrooms? And it's just magical when you see this circular mushroom groupings. Old dried up puffball on ground in middle of trail. Can't resist. Stop. Poof. And that's it for haiku. You mentioned about my first sharing of a poem in public, right? Here's the trivia question and a free book to the first one right answer, okay? Little chapbook from the Adirondack Mountains, 10 Days in Huntington Wildlife Forest. But the first poem I ever wrote was in high school, junior year high school. And for 2 days, we went over lyrics to songs to see if they were poetry. And then the next day came into class and Mr. Kerr, the teacher, said, okay, I want you to write a poem today. The trivia question is, I'm going to name the title. Some of you know this, those of you who know, you don't count, okay? So you can't.
What kind of preemptive elimination is that? We know something.
So I'm gonna name the song that I took in. You know, I could have taken 20 songs in. I ended up picking this one. I'm gonna name the title. First person who yells out whose song it was, you get this book, okay? So here's the title of the song. Masters of War.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, hey, all right, George, yes, there you go.
Oh, wow.
This was not fixed.
I never win anything here. I want to be clear about that.
But who made that song actually more popular than it was?
I don't know.
It was after, obviously it was after Dylan, but
Oh.
it was like a top 40.
Yeah, who was it?
I can't remember, but it was made, he's gonna find it. Hopefully he's not, but,
It's got Google out.
no, I'm just a folk musician from the San Francisco area made it actually popular, top 40, but it was a Dylan song. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I was doing a class at Hunter College High School in the city, and
Oh, wow.
a poet who was republished brought me in to talk to the students, and I mentioned that song, Masters of War, and some of the students knew that.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of probably what you're referring to, Walt. Like it would be done much later by somebody else.
Well, it's actually amazing what students know about music 50 years ago now, because the internet has kind of leveled everything. So
Yeah.
students show up with Rolling Stones t-shirts in my class sometimes. How old are you?
I'm gonna read just one little section from 20 Days en Route 20. And this is a book of Haiban, Japanese form of condensed prose and haiku. And Route 20 is the longest road in America, Boston to Newport, Oregon. And I did the trip the first time in '96, and this book is from that journey. And,
What town in Oregon?
Newport.
Yeah.
Newport, Oregon, right there on the coast, yeah. Yeah, anyone ever been to the Lake Michigan Dunes National Lake Shore? Well, it's an amazing area along Lake Michigan, and it's dunes, these sand dunes in it. So I stopped there on this trip. But and there's a haiku here that'll come into play. At Lake Michigan Dunes National Lakeshore Visitor Center, and now, and one of the first trees I see is sassafras. Oh, how the years evaporate. Memories come floating in from a camping trip long ago. With my ex-wife near Harrisburg, PA, finding sassafras trees, gathering roots and drinking cups and cups of tea while sitting around the campfire. Sassafras is reputed to help clean the blood, but I've never read about aphrodisiacal properties. That night in the tent, first hike while on journey, Dunes Ridge Trail, old dunes anchored by oak and sassafras. Trail winds up and down tree-covered sandy mounds. On sandy Dunes Trail, two white puffballs taste so good, whitetail runs away. Eventually I made it to Lake Michigan, small Great Lakes waves lapping sandy shore. To the west, factory smokestacks of Gary. Northwest, skyline of Chicago. I think of Lou Welch's Chicago poem. This dune-shored lake, a brief respite before the onslaught of miles and miles of city suburban madness. Oil refineries, smell of petroleum in the air, industrial USA. Reminds me of 25 years ago, walking past Niagara Falls chemical plants on hitchhiking way from Buffalo to Niagara University to visit Michelle. How could anyone live near such a place? Anyone familiar with the chemical plants that used to be in Niagara Falls there? And well, just filled the air with just this chemical. And I remember the first time smelling a paper mill in Oakford, Maine, my first year of hitchhiking. Oh my gosh, and somebody said that's the smell of jobs. You know? Okay, George referred to the memoir, Becoming Who I Needed to Be, so I want to read from that. And it goes from John F. Kennedy's assassination, it starts with that, and ends in 1997 when I went west to promote the Route 20 book for the first time. And that was the first time going cross country as a poet. So, and, I went somehow from blue collar, Polish community, Buffalo, East Side, working class family to somehow being who I am now and becoming a poet, So, but I want to read, it covers a lot of the hitchhiking days. I hitchhiked off and on for 3 years, about 30,000 miles. But I want to read a certain part about the hitchhiking. And I showed up at Acadia for the first time, my first year hitchhiking. And then I was going to Cape Cod from there. I got to ride all the way to Cape Cod from up in Maine. this couple in a VW van, of course, you know, and we camped in a field in southern Maine, and then next day, we were heading to the Cape, but they wanted to go to Boston to see the USS Constitution. And I decided to get out in Boston instead of going all the way to the Cape, and I'll start from that point. Boston, 100 colleges, so many young people. As we drove through downtown, I decided to get out. They continued on to Cape Cod. I hung around Public Garden, Commons. After 3 hours, only 2 people spoke to me. The city cop told me to get off the grass. Scruffy old guy with brown bag bottle. Would you like a swig, buddy? And that was it. 2 people in 3 hours. That was it, you know. Why did I ever, and this is one long poem, this book, this memoir, it's one long poem, okay? Why did I ever get out? Could have been at Cape Cod by now. Late afternoon, bummed. All I wanted was to get out, 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 find open place to sleep, continue on tomorrow. Beacon Street. I stuck out thumb and saw someone further up block already hitching. Road etiquette, you didn't step in front of someone already thumbing. I stepped on the sidewalk, walked to get beyond, just wanted to get out of city. Then startled by voice, hi, where are you going? The Cape. I have a morning class tomorrow, then heading to the Cape. Don't like to hitch alone, want to go together? Sure, but I don't have a place to stay. Oh, there's extra rooms where I live. We hitched together down Beacon Street, entered Row Building, Interfaith office. Terry had free room there for cleaning offices. After dinner, fried liver with onions. We bought bottle of Matus, took cheese, crackers, blanket. Charles River Park, free concert, New York Rock and Roll Ensemble. We talked, never heard their music. Back on Beacon, I stayed in extra room. Next day, after her class, we hitched to Cape Cod, stayed with friends of hers. In shadow of dunes, we explored each other, kissed, hugged, touched. You're innocent, but not naive, she said of me. Late Sunday afternoon, hitched back to Boston, rode in back of open Jeep. The sun went down, so freaking cold. We huddled close together for warmth. Back on Beacon, I didn't stay in extra room. First time making love for both of us. She had classes to attend, and I hitched back to Buffalo, a few days home before heading out again. In mail, a letter from Terry. I know how much lyrics mean to you. This is all I want to say for now. Followed by words to Carole King's You've Got a Friend. After I read that, decided to head back to Boston in a few days. Next evening, returned home after midnight. Stepfather on porch stopped me from going in. If you leave once more, I don't want you coming back to this house again. I left next morning. 2 days later, back in Boston, a few more days with Terry. A few weeks later, she was leaving, 18 months schooling in France. Weekend before flying off, she drove to Buffalo, nearly 400 miles of one way. A few days together, my newly rented room after being kicked out of house because of my way of life. This new relationship, just begun, interrupted, late morning together, parting heavy on our beings. We walked to car, final hug, kiss, then gone. A little later, I wrote this poem. And in the book, there's a few contemporary poems from that time frame. And this is one because, we had that house fire in 2012, everything, was burned, gone to. And this poem was only in my head. I didn't have a copy of it actually, but it had remained in my head all these decades. And so I included it, and it's a sonnet. I think it's like the only sonnet I ever wrote. It's like, and I didn't revise it. I said, okay, just put it in like it was. So this was this poem I wrote a little bit later after Terry left for France. You cried a tear for me that day, but you stopped so soon, not wanting me to know there had been something the day you were going away. It was too short for me to grieve, so little I'd gotten to know, not much was I able to show. You could have meant so much to me. Maybe there'll come a time again for us to try our chance once more, start over just like before. May we make the most of it then. But for now, I'll just remember our final day last September. My only sonnet, my only sonnet, yeah. So then it goes on, did a bit of hitchhiking, continued. But then this is the next year. I was planning to hitch to Nova Scotia, total solar eclipse visible there. 2 days later, and I was in Buffalo at this point, unexpected letter from Terry. She was back stateside in Dad's house, Springfield, Massachusetts. Left college early, traveled around for a few months in Morocco, saw an Aero candy bar, kind we shared in Buffalo. Heard Joni's Michael from Mountains. Both reminded her of me. 3 days later, I was in Springfield. Hugs, kiss, soon making love when Dad wasn't home. Terry was broke, months traveling without money coming in, needed a job, went out every day, filled out numerous applications. No quick responses. After a few days, her not having job success, I thought to ask her to go to Nova Scotia with me. That morning, a phone call, friend she met in Europe, asked if she'd like to go west. She and her aunt driving to California, 3 weeks, then back. Terry could come along, all expenses paid. Terry was excited, said she'd let her know soon. Shortly after, I mentioned to Terry, I was going to ask if you wanted to travel with me to Nova Scotia. No hesitation, of course. A few days later, left Springfield. I'd ended day over 400 miles down the road in Calais, Maine. Allied Van Lines driver gave us a ride from Brewer, Maine to Calais, 100 miles along airline Route 9. Offered us a room in Allied Motel, his empty truck trailer, blankets for mattress. Into Canada, Fundy National Park, on up to Nova Scotia, backpacking in national parks at Kejimkujik, heard moon music, first time ever. Cape Breton Highlands, hiked 12 miles into interior, reindeer moss, pitcher plants, small cabin at end of trail, Lake of Islands, light rain, mist, fog, center of the universe, quiet, still. So many Canadians curious about presidential election. This was 72, right? How can you re-elect Nixon? Does McGovern have a chance? Nope, sorry, not at all. Art from Michigan gave us a ride. Annapolis Valley, drove up dirt roads, past a herd of horses, felt like I was in Wyoming, though had never been there. On bluff high above Fundy Bay, talked for 2 hours. My son glinted off Fundy water. He left behind suburban life, job, wife, bought motorcycle, traveled, explored, Fritz Perls, Gestalt, being present in moment. Brodigan's, how many of you remember this? Brodigan's trout fishing in America. Read aloud alongside of the road while we waited for rides. Strange juxtapositions, appropriate for the times. Eventually created our own trout fishing in Nova Scotia skits to act on. We parted on return, never quite developed deep, meaningful relationship. So that was just one section from this, from the traveling days, which then leads me to this. I just came back from Sweden. George mentioned coming back from Sweden. And I spent 3.5 weeks there. And the reason I went to Sweden is I saw for the first time in 51 years, Terry. She was living in Sweden, and we got back in touch about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, somewhere, and hadn't been in touch since '73. So I ended up going, spending 3+ weeks there, and it was wonderful. I know some of you saw the website. I was posting every day from Sweden, a lot of photographs and words. And I want to read just some of the poems that I wrote while I was there. And these are all my daily spontaneous poems that I post on Facebook every night before going to bed. I do a spontaneous poem. These are all some that were from Sweden. And this one's just before. Whenever another journey begins, I can't help but wonder what lies ahead. Also, can't help but wonder, how will I be changed? And this 2-line poem is the evening when we first met again. Years can sometimes evaporate in a matter of minutes. So, 51 years, which is gone. And yeah, she and her husband, they live in Stockholm. Have a country place too, and this was from there. Cool water washes clean. Baltic Sea. Yeah, I went swimming in the Baltic Sea. It was wonderful. It was so cool and refreshing. It was actually hot there the first few days I got there. Cool water washes clean. Baltic Sea, Wheeler Hill Pond, Echo Lake, Lake Michigan, Indian Lake. No matter where, cool water washes clean. Back in city after 2 days in country, trading morning bird song for evening klezmer music. And that was interesting, just a little side note here. Terry's husband, Charles, played banjo, and they had like a little amateur klezmer group, right? And they were doing a performance that evening, and you had to register online, ahead of time. And they weren't going to tell the location till the day before the performance. And Terry had registered me as guest, just a guest person. So we got there, Terry and I got there, and they wanted to check our IDs, and I wasn't listed though, my name wasn't listed. So they called another person from there over, and he really questioned me quite a bit. Where are you from in the States, and I told him, near Corning. I said, Rochester, I've been to Rochester, I live south of there. He goes, do you belong to any organizations back home? And did anyone give you a package to bring with you? And they were just being really super, super careful about terrorism, and there's a lot of right-wing hatred there that they have to deal with. And in fact, the same place where this performance was 2 weeks earlier, 2 guys with masks came running in and started beating up one of the guys who was a Green Party member. So it was really different. It was really different to experience that. And Sweden, how many of you have been to Sweden? Anybody? Yeah, I know you have, yes. Yes, that's right, Rachel, yes. Let me read this poem. Walking by scores of people, almost none look my way. When they do, they turn away, pretend they didn't look if I catch their eye. I'm so used to saying hi, smile at passersby. Here, I'm a foreigner in more ways than one. And you do not connect with people there. If you're walking on the street, you don't look at, people don't look at you. Nobody says hi. Well, they're hi though, if you're like in the store or something. Hey, that's hi. Hey. I always thought that was supposed to be disrespectful, saying hey. But it's like, hey, but people do not look at you and they do not connect. You could be standing at the corner waiting for a light, and there'll be 12 people waiting, nobody's saying anything. And it was really different. I asked Terry, I said, if I'm walking down the street and I'm looking at somebody, am I invading their privacy? I said, well, maybe for some people. And it was interesting because I like meeting people and talking. And the first few people I ended up talking with were living in Sweden, but they were not from Sweden. They weren't, one woman was from Turkey, a father and son were from Bosnia, another woman I got talking to was from America. It was just really, really different. But I did connect with some Swedes, but it was like a poet, a wonderful poet, Borklund, and John Burroughs, who read here last year, right? Connected me with him, and we had a wonderful time. And then I met, a couple of other, a photographer, and this was interesting. I found that if you did have a reason to approach somebody, you can have a conversation, but you're just not going to have that spontaneous hi and then start talking. And I was sitting on a park bench, and at this nice little park right in the city. And I suddenly had this realization, I have become the classic old man sitting on a bench in the park. And it's like, oh boy, I've gotten to that, right? A good friend of mine, Rhonda, who's going to be reading here in winter, I think, right? Yeah.
I hope, yeah.
I was telling her, she goes, well, were you feeding the pigeons? I said, no, I don't do that. She goes, well, you're not the classic old man on the bench then. You got to feed pigeons too. But I was sitting there thinking that, and the next bench over was an older guy also, and he had a camera, like I always carried my camera, and a book. And a lot of times, if I see somebody reading the book, I'll go up to them and thank them, a stranger reading. Like Bart, remember that in Oxford? Remember the guy at the table in the pub?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
And became a friend, actually.
Yeah.
I worked for Oxford Press.
Yeah, I worked for Oxford. But I went up to him, thank you for reading the book, and then we got to know each other. And Bart, you connected with him after I left even, yeah. So as I was leaving, I walked over to this guy on the bench and I said, oh, I see you've got a book and you've got a camera. And I showed him my camera and I said, so many people are using their phones. It's nice to see a real camera. Well, he was a retired professional photographer.
Right.
And we had this wonderful conversation. We got together again the last day I was there. And he showed me one of his books, a book that, hardcover table, coffee table type book, full of black and white photos. And he's been to America a few times. The one page, the double page, it was Jimi Hendrix, Mick Jagger, Barbra Streisand. These were all people he photographed,
Oh, wow.
and he photographed, the royalty in Sweden, and he was really a well-known photographer there. And it was just one, but we had this good connection, but it was because of the camera, because we didn't just say hi, being strangers. Tread lightly while passing by. One never knows what might be underfoot. That's specifically about swimming. Always meaningful, vibrant connection with another. Two of my favorite words about life. Life should be vital and vibrant. We should live a vital life and have a vibrant life. And just a couple more, I think. That moment long ago was that moment long ago, treasured for what it was. Now there is this moment to be treasured for what it is. And I have gotten back in touch with other friends that maybe I hadn't seen, one person 28 years, and we get back in touch, another person 20 something. And I'm always wanting not to just relive what was, but what is there going forward? And I think that's important, and all except one person from the past that I connected with. There was one person, there was no reason to get together after this, that was enough. And otherwise, everyone else pretty much there's still something to go forward with. Dojin, he was a Zen master, I think the 1200s, maybe somewhere around there. Another place becoming another home. As Dojin said, where every step I take is my home. I concur. This Stockholm home, another in so many homes, as I traveled for so many years, traveled over so many miles, so many homes to be going home to. And I really feel that wherever I am is home, And Carolyn, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but one time, 2013, I was on the road for 14 weeks, a 48-state tour. And I remember talking to Carolyn on the phone from Texas, and was staying with a friend that we both knew somebody that we knew from the past. And I was on the phone with Carolyn, and I said something, yeah, I'm heading home now, meaning to that person's house I was staying with. And Carolyn goes, Michael, you only have one home. So she's very pointed, but she doesn't remember that, right? Oh, you do remember that, huh? Yeah. Yeah, two more, maybe three more short ones. And then I'll finish with one story. Well, actually, there's a few. These eyes that see Sweden, sight new, different, exciting because of newness, are same eyes that see what's back home, not as exciting. I need to take these Stockholm eyes back with me, try to see familiar as new, different, exciting as if never seen before. Winding down last few days, how much more poignant each moment becomes. What do we bring with us when we arrive? What do we take with us when we go? And two more. Tomorrow morning, early morning, ride on metro, express train to airport, flight to Copenhagen, 3-hour layover, 8-hour flight to Toronto, 4-hour drive to River Hill, Stockholm, home for 3 weeks, left behind as memory. And the 4-hour ride was, I think, 7 hours with all the traffic in Toronto and coming out and construction up. And final poem here on one story. 24 hours ago, waking in Stockholm, walking down city streets, making my way back. Just now, arriving on Wheeler Hill, near full moon shines through thin clouds. Fireflies flicker on hot summer night. So we are back to Wheeler Hill. Okay, I'm going to tell a story. I'll finish with this, okay, a little story. I started with haiku. So I'm going to tell a story from one of my road trips. Stand for this. And this was 1998. I was in Minneapolis. I was doing a 30-day trip from following the Mississippi River, where it starts in northern Minnesota, all the way down to the Delta below New Orleans, as far as you can drive. And I was in Minneapolis, this is the 5th day of the trip or so. And the Mississippi River flows right through Minneapolis and right downtown even. And there's an island there downtown, Nicollet Island, right in the river. And you can get down to it. I think there's a hotel on it, but it's wooded all around the outside. And this is October, and I went down to the island so I could walk right near the river. And I'm walking along, and I always, carry binoculars when I'm out like that. And I heard my favorite birds. I heard them. I knew exactly what they were. I couldn't see them yet, but they were cedar waxwings, one of my favorite birds. Nice little flock of them. I heard them buzzing. And where I was at the edge of the woods, it was maybe like a 10-foot little bluff. And I scrambled down the bluff, and I'm standing at the edge of the river. And sure enough, there they were. I could see the waxwings, and I got the binoculars on them and was watching them. And then they flew off and were gone. So I turned around and scrambled back up this little bluff, and there was a gentleman standing there who wasn't there before. And, he was curious what I was looking at, so I told him, and he was from Japan. He was from Japan. And I told him cedar waxwings, and then when I learned he was from Japan, I told him about haibun and haiku and how I write haiku and haibun. He knew all about haibun and that, and we mentioned some of the Japanese, masters, Basho, of course, and Busan and Issa, and he knew all of them. And we talked for a bit, and he said, he knows the haiku poets; they all learn that, and as we were talking, he was saying, "Oh, I should come to Japan sometime." Tentatively, Bart and I are going there in spring, tentatively. And so we were talking, and I looked at him, and I said, "Do you still read haiku?" And he looked at me, and this is what he did. My life has gotten like this. I am an engineer now. Maybe I should read haiku again. We talked a little bit more. Then he gave me his business card. And I was writing a daily article for a local newspaper. I was emailing every day. I said, "Is it okay if I write about this?" He said, "Yeah." And he gave me his business card. His life had gotten like this. He was the assistant manager for Toshiba's space program. So my life has gotten like this, right? And so we parted, and he again said I should try to come to Japan someday. And when I wrote the article, I sent it to him, emailed it to him. Then after I got back home from the trip, maybe a week or so after I got home, I got an email from him. And all it said was, Czarnecki-san, I'm reading haiku again. It's like wonderful, just that. So thank you. Any questions?
So many
George always
questions.
has
I'd
questions.
love to hear people's questions. Anybody have questions?
Questions, comments?
Responses? So we all know you.
So I saw that moon night before last, was that when you arrived? That was just gorgeous. Early in the evening.
Yeah. It's 2 nights ago.
2 nights ago. And I love the description that was of you coming home. So in the sitting here and hearing the poem set elsewhere, the return feels almost as satisfying as if we were experiencing it. Some of us have been up on the hill, so it's such a beautiful place on earth.
Well, I feel the best of 2 worlds. I go out on the road and love that, and I love getting back on the road too.
Yeah.
Rachel, do you have a question? Well, I'm sorry, because it's.
Stockholm in particular, there's different islands.
Yeah,
And I was wondering if you got to go, because I had to go on like a train or the tram there, as they call it, to like go to different ones. You could do like kind of, a little like, because I think there's like 7. It's not like a lot.
14 islands. There's
14 islands.
14 islands that make up Stockholm, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was on, maybe 7 different ones total. I lived on one, Sodermalm, and Gamla Stan is the old city, and that's like buildings going back to the 1600s or so, and That's where the Royal Palace is, and then there's, I couldn't name all the islands, but I also took, there's the archipelago there, there's over 3,000 islands. And I took a boat ride out to one that was pretty much, the whole island was, most of the island was a nature preserve. And it was like an hour and a half boat ride out there, which was wonderful. And I just hiked around all day and yeah, so people would go on boats to the different islands and that. Like the one island I went to was part of Stockholm, and you can get to it by going around and then onto it, or take a 10-minute ferry ride. You know, and people do that all the time there. So yeah, 14 different islands. Right. So, yeah.
Can you say anything about your writing practice while you're traveling?
I do the daily spontaneous poems every night, even when I'm traveling. Now, I've been doing those for 10 years now. You know, it's become a daily practice for me. And my routine, and it's interesting because I pretty much, because I was staying in one place the whole time other than going out to the country there. So my routine was just as if I was home. I get up, I make my pot of tea, you know, and then I go to the computer. I usually check a little bit of the news and then do some writing in the morning. You know, so I was able, being situated in one place and being, you know, home, you know, I was able to keep up the sort of the same routine I did back home. And then I always have a little notebook with me to write when I'm walking around and that. Three things, I've lost 3 things on this trip, which is unusual. My green hat, somehow after I got on the plane going over there from Toronto, my hat disappeared. I have no idea what happened to it, you know. So, and then I was a week into the journey, and you know, I walked and walked all around Stockholm. It was wonderful, all the walking I did. But I stopped in a little store, a little grocery store, and there's a lot of them conveniently there. And I bought a couple of sets of oranges, and I got outside and I sat down and ate them. Oh boy, they were good, right? So I'm walking, and like 3 blocks later, there's another grocery store. And I said, well, let me go in and buy some more oranges. Those are really good. And I go to the counter, and my credit card is gone. I said, what in the world? Whoa. And it's like, I should, you know, 5 times I checked my wallet, all my pockets, my backpack. Went back to the store where I just last used it. They didn't have it. I double checked again, and I ended up calling and canceling that. And it was interesting. A week and a half later, somebody tried to use it. I got a notice that somebody tried to use it a week and a half later for 809 crowns, which is roughly $80 American money, at an electric bike shop or something, you know. So, but they couldn't use it because I had canceled it. That was strange. And then the very last day there, I lost my camera. Yeah, I had, you know, these.
Are you kidding?
I lost my camera. Yeah, I think I left it on the bench, and about 10 minutes later, where's my camera? And I went back, and it was gone. It was gone. So it's weird. I have 3 things I lost. Well, I never do that. But 3 things lost.
Are those the worst losses you've ever suffered on a trip?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, yeah, because I don't think, Carol, do you remember anything I lost?
First thing we've ever been this old, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Walt. But there's some truth to that. too.
Have you ever written any poetry in other languages like Swedish or?
No, I don't know any other language, unfortunately. You know, I had a little part of Route 20 book translated into Japanese one time, and that was pretty cool. And then Bart also put together at a school, there was the Chinese New
It
Year,
was a
right?
celebration of Chinese New Year. We
Chinese
had
New Year,
a reading in both languages.
Yeah, and one of the students translated one of my poems into Chinese and spoke that, so that was pretty cool. But as far as other languages, no, I don't. Any other questions?
I have questions about your journeys.
Sure.
So that made me, the fact that you're always on a journey somewhere kind of makes me think of a lot of things. So, I mean, one thing is occurred to me was you're traveling with Bart in the spring, and you have traveled with Bart.
You know,
So there's a big difference between traveling alone and traveling in company.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what that difference is for you?
Well, it's a big difference, yeah. I mean, you know, just like not even just traveling, but just getting together. Two people is different than three people. The conversation changes and that. And I like to be real spontaneous. I don't plan things out a lot when I'm traveling, you know, unless it's a reading tour. I've got readings. And I like going, just playing it by the ear, you know, and what do I feel like doing now? Or where do I want to stop here? And when you're with somebody else, you know, it's not just you anymore, you know. But Bart and I, he was in Oxford 2 years ago, and that was the first time I ever left America other than Canada. And then he and I traveled in Wales for like 5 or 6 days or whatever it was. And it worked well. We traveled well together. So that's why we're thinking about Japan.
Yeah, that's
But I think depending on, you know, we're gonna, you know, get talking about that soon, but depending on timing and that, I probably will want to be in Japan by myself too, part of it. You know, maybe we'll go in a week or 2 weeks, I don't know, but then I wanna have some of my own time just traveling by myself.
Does it,
Michael's planning to lose me at the airport.
I think so, yeah, that's what it sounds like. Does being with someone else or on a trip affect this idea that, you know, wherever I am is home? Because it seems like having been in that position myself, it's easier to establish a routine and a sense of home if you're by yourself.
Yeah.
So what it seems like to me is that you're.
Yeah, and well, definitely, because whenever you're with someone else, you have to consider that person. And the other thing too, a lot of times as I traveled on these journeys for the last, you know, well, let's say Route 20 was really my first big journey, and I was 96, or how many years ago was that? 30 years ago, almost? Yeah, almost. A lot of times what I have done in the past too is barter for rooms, you know, because I've never had very much money. And I would be giving a reading like here and say, I'm on the road, you know, this, you know, I'm not close to home. I'm on the road, I just gave you this reading. And I would, in the Route 20 book is when I got a part there where I started bartering for rooms, trading books for a place to stay. And so often what I did for a long time, I would tell that at the reading, then I would look and say, okay, anybody here got a spare couch or something, want to trade for a few books? You know, and I don't think I ever was left stranded. You know, and often there'd be more than one person would offer to put me up, you know. And that was really cool doing that because, and I never ran into a bad situation either. You know, just good people and good-hearted people, but with two people that would be so much harder to do. I don't know if I could do that as easily, you know. So,
Yeah.
so, you know,
There's a way people connect with you when you're traveling alone, that they open up to you in a way that I think they would not if you're.
yeah.
That's my experience.
Yeah, and also if you're traveling alone, you relate more to people because instead of relating with the person you're traveling with so much, you tend to focus on connecting with others.
Now to probe the darker side of this a little bit, it also made me think about Odysseus and, you know, I am nobody. Basically, like when I travel, I'm nobody. I don't really have an identity that you know at least. So like home is the opposite of that. When you're home and everybody knows who you are. You know, travel. So is there something that you crave in that, is being anonymous, being nobody? Is that and how does that connect to your writing? I guess that's an important question.
Interesting, but not being nobody. Let's say what I do when I'm traveling, I am a poet now. You know, it's like I'm not just nobody. I'm this poet, and you know, I'm going on tour. I'm at a place because I'm a poet. You know, so the nobody sort of from that part of it.
Got a role.
Yeah, it does. And there's something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, often I like to, even in conversation with people, not just at poetry reading, I mean, just on the street, or if I'm talking to a cashier or something, which I've had wonderful conversations with cashiers at times, or somebody's out hiking and I'll mention to them on the phone. That's really interesting, the reactions you get. Sometimes it's like, okay, the one crazy reaction I got, this is last year, I was in Eastern Oregon, and I was staying with a friend for like 5 days, and I was out hiking myself one day, and wonderful hike all alone. On the way back, this other guy was just starting to hike up, and we got talking, and I told him a couple of things I'd seen, how this really nice lookout in this one spot. Yeah, I mentioned I was a poet. I said, "Oh, would you like to hear a poem?" No, I don't get involved with things like that. And he backs away. I don't get involved.
Right,
with
it's
things
like,
like
it's
that.
like doing a line of cocaine. Here you go. Yeah, yeah.
I've never had that kind of.
Wow,
reaction.
well, that gets me right to the next thing I wanted to ask you. I'm sorry if I'm going a little too deep with this, but this idea that there's a tension between, like, Hemingway's ideal was the man of thought in action, right? So there's a tension between traveling and actually doing things and then reflecting on them at the same time. There's a huge tension in that. Do you have any thoughts about that? You know, because I often wonder, why do I write? Why do I read books? I could be out there doing stuff. Instead, I'm reading a book.
I don't know. Never thought about it.
Okay, yeah.
I think about your comment regarding Odysseus. He would say, "I'm nobody for his own preservation on their own situation." But he always had a goal, man. He was focused on home. That's all, you know, that's what meant everything to him. So it wasn't like, you know, he had no identity. It's like, you know, he definitely knew what he wanted, and his home was there. He was on his route. That was what it was all about. He was a poet too, you know, in a sense. So there's that tension on it.
Yeah, and that gets to the, I promise, the very last question I have.
Oh, it's okay. That's got a question too.
Yeah, that,
Okay, you're a solitary traveler, and you've done this for years, is that correct? Have you noticed a difference in the number of female solitary travelers over the years? Because I don't go anywhere because I'm like scared shitless, I'm really shy, so, and I like to talk to people, but to the thought of traveling anywhere by myself is overwhelmingly frightening. So I'm just curious if you have observed any increase in numbers or.
I can't say that I have noticed that at all, but I certainly have talked to a number of people, a number of women who were solo travelers and comfortable with that, you know. But yeah, I can't say that I can compare now to 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
As my instance, I always loved solo fly fishing. You know, getting out in the wilderness, get out on the stream one-on-one with nature and all that. And I very often encountered other people like myself, guys, single. And then as years went on, I started noticing more females out actually not just, you know, fly fishing with their sons or husbands, but on their own, being more, you know, being more solid, more brave about venturing forth independently.
Yeah.
Which I thought, hey, that's cool. Because I was seeing that, so maybe, I don't know if it extends into the wider world.
I mean, it gets, you know, it gets to female fear, the female fear, right? Of being attacked, of being, you know, assaulted. Actually, I don't know, I've been doing a lot of traveling for the past 10 years on one project, and 5-10 years ago, I was much bolder. This last time that I went on this round of trips, I was a lot more careful because I'm feeling my age and I'm feeling my vulnerability. And so I think that's part of it too. If you're feeling, Michael doesn't seem to feel his age, which is great. I hope, you know, that I can get back to that, but it's a hard thing. When you feel any kind of vulnerability, I think traveling becomes more challenging, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've changed, over the years in terms of feeling more vulnerable. Or that. But I'm careful, but I'm not paranoid. I mean, I've never had, really have not had a negative experience on the road with having to do with other people. Now, the one time I was down south and I was pulling up to a little store, very edge of a small town, and I parked, and there were like 4 guys standing there to the right of the door, and they noticed me. They noticed the New York license plate, my old car. They noticed me, and I noticed them noticing me. And I walked into the store, and I forgot what I bought something, and I thought, okay, what should I do here? So I walked out of the store, and they were all standing there. I walked right up to them. I said, hey, you notice I'm not from around here? You saw the New York plates. I'm just passing through, but I'm really curious about your town. What's one really cool thing that I should know about your town here? And they all got into it, all coming up with something to say. And I don't know that there was any reason to fear, but I just was a slight uncomfortable. And how do I neutralize that?
And you can do that, because a woman had done the same thing. This one would.
Yeah, question now.
Well, so some of our fear, I think, is generated by moments in movies we can't get out of our minds. So like Easy Rider, that did not end well for those fellows.
Deliverance.
Someone said the Georgia Chamber of Commerce tried to outlive Deliverance for like 20 years, 2 decades after. So there's stereotypes, and I lived in New York City for a while, and I was nervous, going to certain neighborhoods, and my cousin who'd been there longer said, just take a book. This was pre-screen day. Just take a book, keep your head down, you'll be fine. And with that sort of, I don't know, it's like kind of like opening the door. I hear you, Beth, when you're talking about, kind of nervousness. For me personally, I feel like as a society, we need to fight that a little bit. I got a person in my neighborhood who's moved in maybe half a year ago. She's always plugged in. The face is rigid. I mean, we pass each other a lot. And there has not been a single exchange. And now I worry, okay, if I approach her, it would feel almost like too odd for her or whatever. It's just, but it feels unnatural to me. And I think it's very much an individual thing. My wife says, oh, you're such a cock. George, you know what that is.
Yeah, someone who talks too much.
Yeah. So I think it's a personality thing.
Yeah.
In part, but I think there's probably
But
we gotta be cautious.
that's a pretty astute comment about our images, the ones burned into our mind. As a New Yorker, when he was talking about Boston, I was thinking, of course they won't talk to you in Boston. That's how Bostonians are. If you were in New York, everybody would be talking to you. In fact, they'd be giving you advice on the street. This is what you should do. Let me tell you that Denise noticed this right away when she moved to New York. It's like plenty of people want to tell you exactly what you should be doing at any given moment. But I've never had a problem in any city or any place where I've walked around as a stranger like Michael, as long as you engage. I used to work in the worst neighborhood in Brooklyn in 1990 in an EMS center called East New York. It was unbelievably bad. The crime rate was through the roof. But I was engaged with the people there, so I had to be. I was teaching there. It's kind of like what you put out. But even in strange cities, the same thing. New Orleans, same thing. Yeah.
My daughter's like that. She goes to college in Albany and she takes the train home a lot. And first time she took the train, I'm like, okay, call me when you get to the train station.
Right.
Call me when you're on the train. Dad, relax. They're all families and college kids on the train. Now she's, 2 years later, she's a pretty savvy traveler with what she brings and how she acts and stuff. And she's a solo traveler too.
Traveling is like
she relate well.
Traveling is like the antidote to watching the media, basically. Yeah. Denise and I have a running joke where she's talking about all the children who have disappeared. She's like, so many children don't, not that many children actually disappear, but you hear about the ones who do way too much. Yeah. So anyway, that's. I'm sorry, I'll get down. So I have one more question, one more artistic question for you. So your poetry is straight narrative. least the poetry you read today, especially this book, coming when it to be, there's no metaphor. I mean, very little. There's very little comparison, very little metaphors, very little sort of, pause, regressive imagery. You trust the events to be interesting.
I hope
Are you
so.
conscious of that? Like how much you're trusting all those things, everything that happens in the sequence to be interesting?
Yeah, I trust that it is, and the whole thing with metaphor and all, haiku, you don't use metaphor, you don't, I've been writing haiku for decades, and I think there's a bit of that influence that has led to the other writing I do.
I mean, the lines are beautifully phrased too, which carries a lot of weight. They all seem to end exactly where they need to end, which is not easy. But yeah, that's notable. Like this is it's like reading a very compressed novel or a very compressed autobiography. Like it really is.
Yeah, it's interesting, the one poet I met, John Burroughs connected me in Sweden, he has a memoir in the same form, same thing, just this long poem that he gave me his memoir. What's the title? I missed Woodstock, or something like that. He was in prison in Turkey when Woodstock was happening. Yeah, and it's interesting also because I've got a book that's out of print with haiku, with artwork, with drawings. It's the zoo haiku from the Minnesota Zoo. And the publisher got somebody to do calligraphy art for each haiku. And Bent, the Swedish book, I met artist friend of his, and they collaborated on a haiku book with art too. So it's interesting, the poet I connected with there, some similarities in terms of, what we've been creating.
I'm not going to ask you about fishing, but I want to.
Fishing?
Fishing.
Well,
Yeah,
waltz the
well, there's so
man
much. There's so much fishing and fish in a lot of poetry that people write. Maybe especially in this region, a lot of stuff that people write. There's a lot about fishing.
Yeah.
I had a conversation about trout with somebody today, and I didn't know this, but there was for a while this sort of little trend of using the word trout to say like great or bad, like that's so trout.
That's so true.
I've never heard that before.
I haven't heard it.
No. Yeah.
And
So
that's
anyway,
what was trout fishing in America? I've heard that's supposed to be about fishing, but it really wasn't.
it was a poet.
When
No.
I was on Route 20 in Massachusetts this one time, Western Mass, and I don't know if it's the Westfield River, there's a river there.
Yeah.
And I'm driving along 20, and there was a fisherman at the back of his car, and I stopped just to talk to him, right, about fishing, and then I told him about Route 20 being, the longest road in America, and there we are on the side of Route 20. I said, yeah, from here all the way to Oregon. And he was so much a fisherman, he just looked at me and said, that'd be too much fishing for me. So, okay.
That's how I feel about living here sometimes. It's like there's too many places to go.
Well, thank you, George.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I do have books. Any book is $10 if anyone's interested today.
And Bart, do you have a hand up, Bart?
Oh, I was getting ready to do one.
Oh.
Thank you, Mike.
One other thank you. I want to thank George, but also poets and writers too.
Yeah.
I want to thank them for funding literary programs throughout New York State.
Yeah, and we just got we got a Livingston County grant approved today.
Great. All right.
Yay.
Yes.
So that's good news for our writers too.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.